Hello everybody, welcome to a very exciting prediction video. This is the time of the season that we love as EFL fans, and I am joined today by the two main men when it comes to Not the Top 20 podcast, the podcast, full stop. Ali Maxwell, George Elek.
Hi mate.
Welcome. That's as cordial as it'll
the
get.
The podcast, not even the EFL podcast, just the podcast.
I said full stop for a reason, George.
Great.
Let's power on.
Love it.
Prediction time here. We're going to go through every single playoff in the Championship, League One and League Two. And you guys are going to put forward the teams that you think are going to go and win it. And then in time, you will get abuse online. I will stay out of that unless you can't decide. And then I will put forward my pick. Let's get straight into it. Let's start off with the Championship. And a cracking tie. It will be a triple header by the end of it. Middlesbrough against Coventry. George, how do you see this one playing out? Two teams who've had, obviously, a cracking season.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really tight. These two teams played against each other on final day, a 1-1 draw at Middlesbrough. It was a game that was more important to Coventry. If Coventry had lost and other results had gone against them, they could have fallen out of the top six. They went ahead in the game. I think it's interesting to note that Borough had 72% possession, which I think we'll probably see the way this goes. The issue for Borough with that is normally, you think of possession being the team who are in charge, but Coventry are unbelievable at playing on the break. And Victor Gyökeres, they've got one of the best strikers in the league, second top goal scorer in the Championship this season, an unbelievable runner down both channels, strong in the box as well. Not the most clinical, I wouldn't say, but scores a lot of goals nonetheless. And Gustavo Harmer, they've got one of the best central midfielders who can play on the break as well, a goal scorer as he showed in that game. So a tight one. I know Ali, I think, disagrees with me. I'm just...
Straight into a disagreement, that's nice.
I think
like it.
I'm basically just about going for Borough here. I think it's easy to have some recency bias and go for Coventry because they're good run up until the end of the season. Borough, after the top two hopes went out the window, they kind of limped over the line a bit. We saw Carrick rest some players too. Their performance in games such as the Luton game they lost was much better than the results suggested. And I think in the likes of Chuba Akpom being the key one, but also Cameron Archer, who's been an unbelievable pickup as well. Riley McGree, Ryan Giles on the left-hand side. They've got so much firepower that I think, even though they're a team who aren't that solid at the back, I think in a playoff campaign, having that kind of attacking threat that you can rely upon means I'm just giving them the edge. It's not a confident one. It's not a confident one. Borough are favourites for the playoffs with the bookies, and I think I'm just leaning on them to get through.
It's always a bit awkward, isn't it, when you do have that sort of last few games, you're in the playoffs, the sort of momentum won't look like it's there. But Carrick's done a fantastic job at Borough, so why are you going against him in this?
For me, this is the worst possible opposition for Middlesbrough. I think they're a brilliant team. And I think there are other teams that could have ended up in fifth spot, could have been the teams they played against in the semi-finals, they would have had a much easier time playing through, and their attacking rotations and the movement in particular of Archer and Akpom has been absolutely brilliant. That comes out in their goal tally. But you have to say they've been very vulnerable defensively for a top side. And part of that is by design, the way that they play. They do want the games to be open because they back themselves to have the firepower to blow teams away, and more often than not they have done that. I think because of the reasons George has mentioned, the positives when it comes to Coventry City, that this is the worst possible matchup for Borough, and I just feel that in the playoff scenario it will play into Coventry's hands. They will be happy for Borough to come onto them, and Borough will do that. I don't see Carrick making a big tweak to his philosophy in order to change and adapt to play against Coventry City. I think that would be dangerous to do. But watch the last 10 weeks of Coventry City. They're so comfortable sitting in, quite deep. They're so comfortable defending their box. They will not be stretching themselves too much up the field out of possession. But as soon as they win it, their patterns in transition are unbelievable. It's based around getting the ball to Harmer or getting it as quickly as possible into the channel for Gyökeres. They've got Matt Godden up there as well, who keeps defences very honest because he is a very good finisher. And they can basically just attack with three players while keeping their own defensive structure. They got the second most clean sheets in the Championship this season. So they are about as good as it gets defensively. And I think their manner of attacking could exploit a huge weakness for Borough.
I think there's also a really interesting point about the managers here, where in playoffs, I think when you picture two managers against each other, it's always interesting. And even though you've got Michael Carrick and Mark Robins, two ex-Manchester United players, in terms of their manager profiles, they couldn't be more different. Yeah. This is Carrick's first season in charge of as a manager, and he came in halfway through the season. Robins has over a decade's worth of experience. He's been at Coventry for the last 6 seasons.
Playoff victories as well.
Playoff victories in the past, Wembley victories in the EFL trophy too. So in that sense, you're going after, in Carrick, the guy who could feasibly be an elite manager in the future, or the tried and tested Robins.
I've got to make a decision, haven't
I?
Yes. I am flip-flopping literally as you're talking here. I'm going to go with what I had before you guys started talking, which was Middlesbrough. I think they've got enough.
That's tough.
The firepower's there. Akpom 28 goals this year, absolutely outrageous. Giles with the crosses as well. I just think they've got enough stardust there to get themselves over the line. But you could easily. It's going to be about the strikers in a big way for both sides. And yeah, I think there'll be more goals than you would imagine actually, despite that 1-1 in that first game.
Borough games are so high scoring. So.
Yes, exactly. And no one's had created more XG than Borough. And that's with Burnley in this division. So that's why I'm going to go with Borough. Luton against Sunderland. Luton finishing third in the league, and Sunderland sneaking in there right at the end. There's often a feeling around the team that does sneak in, and you feel like it's fate. I thought Sunderland would have a good season this year, and they've got better and better as it's gone on. How do you feel about this one? Because Rob Edwards has done a fantastic job at Luton.
Yeah, he has. Don't get Ali started on momentum at this stage of the season. He doesn't like it. But Sunderland do come into it with form. I think they've finished the season. I think 4 weeks or so ago, it felt very unlikely they were going to be able to get into this top six, and they've done it. They've done it impressively with a massive 3-0 win on final day against Preston, really standing up to the pressure. And I think you have to be incredibly impressed with what Tony Mowbray has done in terms of building this team. Again, like Carrick, taking it on when Alex Neil left early on in the season, but developing a side who, without Ross Stewart, their talismanic striker, who's had 2 serious injuries, without Danny Batt and Dan Ballard, who've been injured for the last few weeks, they're 2 towering centre-backs. Their back four at the moment is really makeshift in terms of Luke O'Nien, who plays centre-back for the most part now, but by trade hasn't been that at all. Troy Hume, who's a right-back by trade. You've got Lyndon Gooch playing right-back, although now he's injured. And that, in my mind, is probably the key thing coming into this, where, yes, Sunderland are in good form, but you've got a makeshift back four already. Dennis Serkin, who is an incredibly important player, was part of our EFL 21 under-21 list back in February. He went off injured against Preston. Lyndon Gooch went off injured against Preston. So you've already got an injury issue. Added to that, you've got players who are fresh with Luton, with Carlton Morris and Elijah Adebayo being rested for their game on final day. So Luton, a team who over the course of the season have amassed the more points. I'll leave it to Ali to praise Rob Edwards in a second. But they've amassed the more points over the course of the season. They've been the better team by miles over the course of the season, coming into it fresh. And Sunderland, yes, they have the form coming into it, but they are the walking wounded at the moment. I think that's
Luton are unbeaten in 14 games as well. Yeah. Sunderland in 9 games. So even though Luton have had it a little easier over the last few weeks, they've been able to plot for this and prepare for this and rest players where necessary. They're also going into it having not let any performance levels slip on the field as well.
So do you see Luton going through as well?
I do, over 2 legs.
Okay.
I really think... I think Sunderland have match winners, and I'm sure they'll have some incredible moments of quality. I love watching them play. Over 180 minutes, I see Luton as the stronger side, who I think will get to Wembley. Yeah,
it's very difficult to play at Luton as well. That's a tough away game, and that'll be the second one. I agree with you guys. I think Luton will make it through. So, kind of sticking with Luton, they've got to go and beat Middlesbrough in the final of the playoffs, the Championship playoffs. How do you see this one working out? Do you think Luton can get the job done?
Yeah, well, as you know, I think Coventry might get past Borough, but regardless, I think Luton will win, whether it's against Coventry, whether it's against Middlesbrough. I think tactically they're such a good and complete all-round team. You have a team like Borough who are really good in a certain sense but have a very obvious weakness as well in defending in transition. You have a Coventry side very good at attacking in transition, not as much of a threat in terms of more sort of possession play. So I think, again, there are ways you can defend against Coventry if you really want to set up in a defensive mindset. For me, Luton are good in open play. They've improved technically on the ball since Rob Edwards took over massively. They are a big, strong team with a threat from set pieces. The front two of Adebayo and Carlton Morris really dovetail nicely as well. So I see them as the best all-round team, and I see them as the playoff winners, which would culminate the most incredible story in the EFL in the last decade or so.
And we know that playoff finals, as entertaining as they are because of what's at stake, generally are pretty cagey games, and that massively plays into Luton's hands. I can't really see Borough being able to turn up with that much at stake and being able to play their own game. And if it does comes down to a fine margin game, again, there's only 1 or 2 goals, it's Luton who have that defensive solidity in the players. Morris and Adebayo's partnership is so important that I fancy them to get through as well.
I think the other thing I think with Luton is they play at quite a nice tempo. Middlesbrough want to sort of get on the ball. Yes, Wembley is a very big pitch, but when you see these finals, it is a mile a minute, and I just feel like being able to play that way quickly and efficiently. They've got a lovely attitude about them as well. I think it could be a really historic year for Luton. I agree with you. Guys, do you agree? Let us know in the comments down below. We've got to keep moving, though. We've got to move on to League One. And poor Sheff Wednesday who will take on Peterborough, who snuck in, beating Barnsley, another playoff hopeful that we'll talk about in just a second. Sheffield Wednesday with 96 points at the end of all of this. Is that gonna sting, or is that gonna make them angry? How do you see that working for Darren Moore's side here?
You've got to be careful what you say about this, because a lot of Wednesday fans feel like they bottled it, feel like Darren Moore is to blame. I personally think
you've got to be careful, and then says they bottled it.
No, it's Wednesday fans themselves who are saying it. I don't think that at all.
All right, okay. Let's make sure. Let's make sure. Yeah, just as yourself.
I think when you get 96 points in a season, if you have a bad run like they did, normally that is buried. People ignore it and forget about it because you're still getting promoted. For them, they were up at the top end of the table. They went through a bad run, which most teams do at some point, and they were punished for it by two relentless sides in Ipswich and in Plymouth Argyle, who were able just to win a ridiculous amount of points. And they finished the season on 101.99 points. I think 13th most points amassed by Sheffield Wednesday over.
Yeah, one of the best League One teams of all time.
Yeah,
wow.
And they
Sheffield Wednesday.
I think the important thing here is normally going into a playoff campaign, that team that finishes third with a high points tally, we saw it with Northampton last season in League Two, really struggled to get over the emotional issue of missing out. I don't think that's the case for Sheffield Wednesday here, because they come into this having known for the last 2-3 weeks that they're probably going to end up being a playoff side, certainly for the last 10 days. They've got key players coming back, Josh Windass being one of them, who adds another really important strength to what they've already got in terms of their attacking threat. Barry Bannon, probably the best technical player in the whole division. And even though they kind of stuttered over the line, they ended up finishing 9 points clear of Barnsley in the end in 4th place.
Won their last 4 games. So they will very easily be able to tell themselves, yeah, we had our blip, but we were over that. We've rattled out 4 wins in a row. They beat Derby on final day, and in doing so knocked Derby out of the top 6. And for me, the reason I'm really strong on Wednesday making it to Wembley, I think that they'd be much happier playing Peterborough than Derby County. And that's because I see Sheffield Wednesday as a really strong team. They do have the technical quality of Bannon, but they're also a big bunch. And I really think they can just kind of squash this posh team, who are beautiful to watch, have some great attacking players, really great on the break, could easily hurt Wednesday, but who I think when push comes to shove in these big games, these big occasions, Wednesday will fancy themselves to basically outmuscle Peterborough United, and I think they'll make it to Wembley.
Okay. Also, good spread of goals over the season. Gregory and Smith, and as you say, Bannon 20 goal contributions, 7 goals, 13 assists this year. He's unbelievable in that division.
And credit to Peterborough quickly before we move on, just because a massive win on final day against Barnsley. They will play their part, but I do think Wednesday should get through.
That first leg will be really important, won't it? Barnsley against Bolton, Michael Duff against Ian Evatt, 2 great managers in the division. How do you see this one panning out?
So difficult. I really, really rate both teams, both managers.
Different styles.
Yeah, they are different styles. Bolton are, of all the teams in the League One playoffs, the more measured, possession-based team. They like to hold the ball and they really like to work it. They don't take a lot of long shots. They try and prioritise getting to the bylines and creating cutbacks for Dion Charles, for Carl Dempsey, players like that. I think Barnsley have a bit more about them going forward because they're good enough in possession. They're not as obsessed with holding the ball for long periods of time. They can attack really quickly. They're happy to have a go from range, and they've got the players that can hurt you from range like Adam Phillips. I just think they've got probably one more dimension in attack than Bolton. And I also think defensively they are much for muchness. I actually think both teams can be got at defensively. Bolton have had some injuries in the last month or 2 of the season, so not a lot of consistency in that back line. And Barnsley themselves, they started the season really, really solid and not scoring many goals, and then halfway through the campaign completely flipped. And they've gone for this quite gung-ho style. It's really suited them. They've picked up loads of points, scored loads of goals. So for me, this is going to be a fabulous game for the neutral. I just lean towards Barnsley because I think they've got a little bit more confidence, a bit more form over the last couple of months, and as I say, just that extra dimension in attack, more ways of hurting Bolton.
Yeah, because it's interesting you say, 80 goals Barnsley have ended up scoring this season, conceding 47, so 11 more than Bolton. This feels like a tie that someone's going to win and win by a bit of a margin here, because I could see Bolton maybe getting one of those early goals and then controlling the game.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to note that Barnsley's goal scoring record at home before the game against Ipswich and Peterborough, where they struggled, although against Posh they did create enough chances, is incredible. Devante Cole's had an amazing season. Cadden's delivery off the left as well. They are a side who create a lot of chances. Bolton, I think their form and their performances haven't been great over the last couple of months. However, they did go to Wembley and beat Plymouth Argyle 4-0 in what is a cup game, basically, in the EFL Trophy final, showing that Evatt can prepare his team for this kind of niche kind of game where it's one opponent that you've got to get past in order to progress. So I also just think Barnsley, but it wouldn't surprise me. This is I'm not as kind of bullish on this one.
Okay, so 2 Yorkshire sides in the final here.
Yeah.
Do we stick with Sheffield Wednesday? Do you think they're just going to sort of overpower it?
Yeah, I mean, there's always... We were at the game between Charlton and Sunderland in the playoff final where Charlton won 2-1, and this would feel quite similar to that, where Sunderland fans went to that game knowing how important it was for the future of their club and what was at stake. Massive fan base, desperate to get out of League One and get back to where they think they belong, and the pressure kind of seemed to get to them there. I'd have slight concerns that might be the case again here, especially given that the fan base aren't really united behind their manager in Darren Moore. However, when it comes to making a prediction, I think Wednesday are the likely winners because they've been the better side over the course of the whole season. They've got key players who I think are so important, and also because, when it comes down to it, it's those players like Barry Bannon, it's those players like Josh Windass who I think will make the difference. So, yeah, Wednesday just about.
Yeah,
Okay.
co-sign.
So, co-sign, lovely. And into League Two now, and this is an interesting one. Stockport against Salford. You've got Stockport sort of, having a bit of a tour through the divisions, it feels like, whereas Salford have struggled to get out of this one, and we've sort of been waiting for them to blitz that league, and it's just not happened at all. Stockport, I would imagine, are the favourites for this one, but is it a bit more complex than that? How do you see it?
They are the favourites, and I absolutely understand why. And if it wasn't for a few just awkward issues with finishing, particularly in the last few months, that they could easily have finished in the top 3. And overall, they're a really, really strong team. Salford, obviously, the team in 7th. So Stockport, understandable favourites. I'm actually picking Salford here, and it's because I don't see a huge amount between the two teams. I could easily see it going either way. It's for 2 big reasons. Stockport missing, for me, their star man, Kyle Wootton, their striker, who's not just... You might expect a League Two striker to be a really important goal scorer. He's actually someone that I think just makes the whole team better, makes the whole attack flow better. He's a brilliant target man. And I think he would have a good time against a Salford back line that can look a little bit iffy, but he's missing. Whereas Salford have got really clean bill of health, and they've got so many match winners in that team. The likes of Louis Barry off the left. He was at Barcelona a couple of years ago as a youth player. He's playing in League Two now. You could say the same about quite a few of their players. And they've got incredible firepower, joint top scorers in the league. And even though Stockport have this sturdier profile, I'd say, and they probably will control the games quite well, I just feel Salford have got a bit of extra stardust. And so I'm leaning towards them, but this is somewhere where we disagree.
Yeah, I'm Stockport. I think they've been unlucky not to finish in the top 3. I think they are resolute defensively. They've got to get over the disappointment of not beating Hartlepool on final day and seeing the Northampton result go their way. But I do think they have, in Dave Challoner, a very, very good manager who won a playoff campaign with Hartlepool out of the National League, who won a promotion last season with Stockport, going for 3 promotions in a row as a manager against Neil Wood, who's having a very good, but his first season of management. I think Stockport edge it, Edgeley Park. There you go.
Nice.
Thanks.
Do you know, I think, Ali, you've convinced me there.
No.
I think the injuries do make a massive difference. 18 goals, to lose 18 goals from your side
For sure.
it's going to hurt a little bit. So maybe it is Salford's year in terms of getting into the final. The other one is Bradford against Carlisle. I went up and did an interview with Mark Hughes recently, and he really enjoyed the expectation that's there at Bradford, but it's certainly a thing.
He said he enjoyed the interview a lot as well, James.
Did he say that?
He said you asked some really
Really?
on-point
Thank
questions.
you. That's good,
No
yeah.
surprise. We're experiencing it now. It's just good fun.
I asked him about his calves, actually. Anyway, but when it came to Bradford, when I was able to dive into their stats, I mean, it's all about that front man. The goals that he scored, no one else has got into double figures this season. But Bradford overall have struggled to score goals this year. They are the biggest club in that division. I think you could argue. Surely there's going to be huge expectations for them to get through.
Massive, yeah. And when you consider they had their record ever attendance at Valley Parade for the game on final day against Orient, beating their attendance against Liverpool in the Premier League, it shows
Amazing.
just how galvanised they are at a club right now. And there's been a malaise at Bradford for a long time. Mark Hughes has come down. It feels to me like he's playing football manager in the way that he's decided at this stage of his career he's going to take over a League Two side and lead them to Europe. And this is his first chance to get them out of League Two. It hasn't, I don't think, been the most convincing season for him as a manager. I wouldn't say that reliance on Cook is pretty stark. Their home form at times has really been disappointing. They seem to be a side who maybe prefer playing away from home and away from that pressure, and that could be an issue over the 2 legs. But I'm going for Bradford mainly because Carlisle, an incredible season, but it does feel like they've kind of limped over the line, and their form the last 7 or 8 games just hasn't been what we saw previously in the campaign.
Yeah, I agree. I think the winner of the League Two playoffs comes from the other tie.
Yeah.
But I agree that Bradford should get past Carlisle just based on where the teams are both at right now, and the fact that Bradford have Andy Cook, but also the goalkeeper Lewis has been probably the best keeper in the division outside of Vigouroux of Leyton Orient. So for me, they just have the probable match winners in both boxes. I think Bradford will make the playoff final.
Okay, so Salford against Bradford in the final. Again, Bradford will come in their numbers for that one. Do you think that will overpower the occasion, possibly?
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see what the discrepancy is between the two fan bases. I don't want to upset Mr. Neville, so I'm not going to say too much. But
he'll be there.
But yeah, he'll be there for sure.
So,
when Jeff did it the other day, I wasn't too happy. Yeah, I mean, I agree with Ali that I think the winner of the Salford Stockport game will win the playoffs. To mention a couple of players, I think Elliot Watt is somebody at Salford who just should not be playing League Two football. He's so technically gifted, a ridiculous amount of assists this season. But it's more than just that. Like the way it's played together is so impressive. Callum Hendry is another one who I'd keep an eye out on as well. He leads the line incredibly well. Big, physical, strong striker, can hold the ball up. Added goals to his game recently as well. Bit of a different player to his dad, Colin. But yeah, I would go for Salford if it is them to get past Stockport.
Okay, agreed. And if it is Bradford, it's Andy Cook, isn't it?
That's it. Yeah. It'll be Andy Cook, no doubt. I wouldn't be surprised if he scores, but I think Salford are the better side with the more firepower, and I think they'd enjoy the type of football that often gets chucked up in playoff finals. I keep bringing up Louis Barry, Bolton on the other side. These are unusual players in League Two because of their speed and their skill. Their dribbling stats are unbelievable. They can break down a defence just by skipping past a man, and that's why they scored so many goals this season.
Okay, guys, let us know. Do you agree? More likely, probably disagree. So let us know in the comments down below.